If you want to make a juicy, tender and delicious tasting brisket, then don't wrap your brisket.
A big thanks to Napoleon Grills for sponsoring this episode.
I'm a big fan of cooking briskets, and I'm also a big fan of wrapping my brisket. But there's one scenario where I don't wrap my brisket throughout the whole cook. You see, there are different styles of barbecue and they require different approaches. And today I'll be cooking on my kettle grill, which means I need to change my approach to cooking the brisket in a way that I'm gonna get a perfect cooked brisket, but also a very, very tasty, flavorful brisket. And therefore, I'm not going to wrap this brisket. But I'm going to show you exactly what I do to make a delicious brisket on a kettle grill. First, let's take a closer look at this brisket. This is an absolute beauty. And if you're getting a pre-packed brisket, then I always recommend to check it out through the package and look at these parts where you can see the amount of intermuscular fat. That is a telltale sign that you're going to get a juicy brisket. I'm cooking a home-style brisket, which just means I don't want to cook my brisket for the looks or for competition-style flavors. I want to cook this brisket so that it tastes really, really good. Now I've got a little bit of fat sitting on top and a little bit of fat sitting on the bottom, but nothing too much. So I'm not even going to trim this. You could clean this whole bottom up and have more smoke penetrated, but in the kettle grill the smoke flavors are going to be more intense than on an offset smoker. And therefore if I leave the fat on, it won't taste less smoky, and actually it's going to be a little bit better because that fat's going to render down and make it more juicy. What I am looking for is the thickness of the cut. Is it thick enough, and aren't there small pieces? Like sometimes you have a brisket where the edges are too thin and it's just going to burn up and it's not worth putting on the barbecue, so then I just trim it up. But this brisket actually looks really good and I just want to keep it as is. Now I'm getting to the second step of preparing the brisket, which is seasoning the brisket. Normally I would just take the PITMASTERX Texas barbecue seasoning, sprinkle it on both sides and smoke the brisket. But there's a big but here. And the but is that I'm cooking it on the kettle grill and I'm not wrapping it. And therefore I'm going to need to use another method. And that is the foil boat method. The foil boat method is a method, well, I'll explain what it is exactly later on, but it requires me to shield off one side of the brisket, letting it sit in its own juices to make it tender and tasty. But those juices will also not let you build up a bark. So that side is just going to require a little bit of seasoning, but I like to compensate that by seasoning a little bit more on the top side of the brisket. I'm going to start by seasoning the bottom of the brisket, and I'm going to use the PITMASTERX Texas barbecue seasoning. Just a light layer of coating will do the job. You're not going to need too much of it. It's salt, pepper and garlic. The recipe's on our website, or you can buy this in our web shop. There we go. This is all set. Flip it around. Now I'm going to prepare the top of the brisket, which is going to be a little bit more elaborate. I'm going to first put on a binder, which is mustard, yellow mustard. I'm going to rub that in. And what this binder is going to do, it's going to help the seasoning stick to the brisket and let you build up a bigger layer of flavor. Once I got that done, I'm going to go in with the PITMASTERX Texas barbecue seasoning. Go. I'm going to use a little bit more of that seasoning. Then I'm going to follow it up with the beef seasoning. That's going to give it a lot of color. It's going to add more flavor to it. And this is the type of seasoning that's going to make you want to eat more and more of that brisket, slice after slice. Oh yeah. Personally, I just want a little bit more, so I'm going to add some chipotle chili flakes. You don't need to add this, but it's a great twist to boost the flavors. All right, this is now ready for the barbecue, so let's fire it up. First, I'm going to put in these bricks to create a heat divider. Behind that, I'm going to put some premium Napoleon briquettes, put on a couple of chunks of PITMASTERX smoke wood, light up a fire starter on one side of the briquettes. Once the fire is lit, I'm going to put the grill grates in. I'm going to close the lid, open up the top vent all the way, and set the bottom vent so it's almost all the way closed. Now I'm going to show you the reason why I don't season the underside of this brisket so heavily. And 1, 2. Now this is going to be my shield. Because we're not going to have such beautiful airflow in a kettle grill as with an offset smoker, we kind of need to expose it longer to the amount of smoke. And especially when you want to render down fat, you need hot air to go over it and let it melt completely. And this is called the foil boat method. So I'm going to curl up these sides. That's going to hold in all the juices. And I got my beautiful top size, well seasoned. I got some strong aluminum foil protecting it. And now I created basically a foil boat. This is going to go in my kettle grill on the opposite side of the briquettes. I'm going to lift it in. I'm going to make it fit. This is about 5 kilograms, so that's already big enough. Don't go over that. Close the lid. There we go. And now we're going to let that warm up together with the barbecue. That's going to take about half an hour to reach its temperature. So you're going to stay close to the grill, watch what it's doing. The way that you control the temperature right now is you got the bottom already set to almost all the way closed. So all you need to do is just dial it down with the top vent. Now, if you have a thermometer that you can stick in it to keep an eye on your temperatures, then I recommend doing that. And for the rest, it's now time to start doing your chores, mowing the lawn, cutting the hedges. Don't go in the house, you get chores, don't do that. That will be a capital mistake. I'm now 2.5 hours into the cook, and I want to show you guys what the brisket actually looks like, because this is normally the point that I would wrap it up. The core temperature is about 70 degrees Celsius, and you can see we're forming a little bit of bark on top, but on the bottom it's still a little bit pale. Now that's the downside of using the foil boat method, but the good side is that even though we have a half decent bark on the outside, it's not looking super amazing. So if I would have wrapped it up right now, I'm gonna have like a almost amazing brisket, but I'm trading that in for a super tasting brisket. The thing that's kind of cool about this method is that you can just continue to cook. You don't need to open up the barbecue and then wrap everything up and then put it back on the barbecue, having to dial the barbecue back in again, because that's kind of the trouble with kettle grills. They're sensitive to changes, the amounts of fuel that you use, the airflow that they get. Unlike I'm just taking the time to show you, you would otherwise not have to open it up. It's kind of like an easy method that makes a better brisket in your kettle grill. I just received a notification from my thermometer that the brisket has reached the core temperature of 92 degrees Celsius. So it's time to take it off and take a closer look. Now, of course, temperature is not everything. You want this to be juicy, you want this to be tender, and actually tender means probe tender. So my recommendation is to get a thermometer out and use the probe and stick it in at random points in the brisket and feel. I'm already thinking about, okay, the thermometer is in the thickest part of the brisket. The rest, of course, is thinner, so that means it's going to cook faster. It might be a little bit overcooked on the flat part, but at least I got my top part to cook exactly the way I want it. But we're going to find out later on, because now it's time for the final phase, and that is the wrap. So weird. Every time meat comes off the barbecue, dog comes in. So contrary to what I was saying before, that I'm not going to wrap it, I am going to wrap it. I'm sorry. I apologize for lying. Can't believe I didn't think this through. I need to rest this brisket, and preferably for a long time. So therefore, I'm going to wrap it in aluminum foil. So I'm going to wrap it. Oh my! Why did I think of that? See what it looks like at the bottom? That is not fantastic looking. I don't really. That's why I don't spend effort in building up a layer and a bark and whatever. It's just really great steamed meat. On the other side, it looks freaking amazing. I'm gonna pour a little bit of those juices and let it rest in the juices. The bark is firmed up, it's not gonna wash it away anymore. Now all I need to do is make sure that it doesn't go anywhere except inside my wrap. It's a hot day today, so I'm going to leave it on the countertop and I'm going to let it sit there for at least an hour. Then we're going to come back and open it up. If you want, and sometimes I do, if you're like it's a late cook and you want to eat this the next day, just put it in your oven. Set it to warm at a temperature of 50 degrees Celsius, which might be around 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And then you're just going to leave it in there and it's going to be freaking delicious. It's going to be even better. It's what they do in barbecue restaurants. They're gonna leave that brisket in a warmer and there it just stays there until service, and it is really The resting is key to a delicious brisket. There we go. The moment of truth. There we go. Oh, look at that. And this is why endless and endless testing of cooking brisket pays off. It's just knowing that you have to compromise. You have to compromise. You have to look at the grill, think, what can I do with this? In case of this grill, you're gonna get a lot of radiation heat. You're gonna cook faster. The aluminum foil is just gonna help protect it. But you're still gonna get a great bark on top of your brisket if you apply that foil boat method. So the end result, as you can see, is freaking amazing. Now what am I looking for? Fat that used to be in here, in all of these little pockets, now rendered down. Also the fat that was inside the little pockets in the brisket. Look at that, that's all coming out again. If you push it, it's the fat going out. The moisture already left the brisket, the juices of the beef. But the fat is what renders down, stays in the beef, and those are where the little pockets used to be. Look at that. It's just endless streams of brisket juices. Let's see if we can get a slice of this. Look at that. Here in the end it's a little overcooked. You can see that it's falling apart, so technically it's a little overcooked. I don't think anybody's gonna mind, honestly. Seriously, the PITMASTERX chickens are around the corner watching what I'm doing. They're making noise because they want a piece. Ah, that is so good. It's just as simple as this. If you're cooking brisket on a kettle grill, try and use the foil bed method. Try and go slow as you can. It might take 6 hours, it might take 8 hours, it might even take 12 hours, but then you're gonna end up with a delicious brisket. But make sure you rest it properly, at least an hour, and then you're gonna get these end results.